This is Johnny Dosco. Stay tuned for another Score Sheet podcast. Holy Kadelka!
Good morning and welcome to another Score Sheet podcast. Happy to say that today we have a kind of a frequent guest and longtime friend, Todd Zola. He's been with mastersball.com since that site started. He also contributes to places like ESPN and various other websites. How are you, Todd?
Doing great, Jeff. Yourself?
I am doing excellently. As Todd and I were talking offline, Todd's one of those guys who plays in a lot of expert leagues and generally finishes in the top three and wins his fair share.
Well, I haven't quite broken through in the tout wars and the labor yet, but I have taken down some of the NFBC leagues, and since they pay money and the other ones are just sort of, for fun and bragging rights amongst my buddies, I'll take the cash.
Well, that's good. Yeah, I always try to pick Todd's brain a little bit in the off season to get some ideas of sleepers. I guess before maybe we go into picking for next year, since they just announced the MVP a day or two ago, are you one of the stat heads that kind of wishes Trout had beaten out Cabrera?
Yeah, I do. Well, first, I don't really care all that much about awards in general, so I don't get too wrapped up in the fact that, I may not agree or disagree with some of the decisions. I like the game for the moment, and if my guy wins, great. He didn't hurt or help, my enjoyment of the actual event. But that said, with MVP, I don't believe in the whole has to make the team better, has to be on a playoff team. I think back in the day they said most valuable just to be cute, and they really meant the best. And to me, Mike Trout's the best player in the American League.
Yeah, I do think that in pretty much any new league that's starting up this spring, whether it's, well, certainly a continuing league because he's a lot younger, but even in a single season league, I got to believe that in an American league or even a combined league, Trout's going to be the first pick in 99.9% of the leagues.
Yeah, especially, with Miguel Cabrera's late season injury woes last year and into the playoffs, I think that's enough to tip the scales. I think Miggy, because some people still are positional scarcity honks, I think Miggy, especially if he shows healthy in the spring, will still go number one in a share of leagues, but otherwise it's going to be Trout for sure.
Yeah, well, I'd like to have him, but there's, kind of everybody knows about him. The more interesting thing, I think, for fantasy players is kind of farther down the ballot. We can all know to pick Kershaw high and Trout high, but some of the guys a little farther down. I was talking to someone about, and actually posted on the Score Sheet Facebook page about Brandon Belt yesterday. I'm a Giants fan, and even I didn't realize kind of how good a season he had had.
I don't think it was that great a season. 17 homers and 270. It wasn't bad, but I think he probably got some West Coast love when the whole valuable thing. Where would the Giants have finished without him? And they didn't really finish all that high anyway. I don't really think Belt had that great a year. He upped himself from his single-digit homers previously, but 17's nothing to write home about, or in that neighborhood anyway.
Yeah, well, of course, in Score Sheet, and I think in real baseball, on-base percentage is quite a bit more important than it is in rotisserie leagues. So if you're a Score Sheet player, you want to pay attention to on-base percentage, and Belt does pretty dang well in that regard.
Oh, absolutely. And granted, the park does hurt him, and since you guys sim towards the results and not necessarily the skills, it's going to carry over, to the actual, sim results for Score Sheet. But if he's a guy that is he John Olerud, or is he James Loney, or will he eventually develop more than just gap-to-gap power if he gets out of that stadium? I look at Will Myers, and I wonder if Will Myers is Brandon Belt or is Will Myers Jay Bruce, because I think they profile very similarly. They all had really good batting average and balls in play in the minors, but struck out a ton. Now, it took Bruce a couple years, so I'm not expecting Myers to have a Jay Bruce type season yet. But to me, that's sort of his ceiling, with Brandon Belt being his floor.
I'm going to be interested to see what Kansas City thinks about that trade of Myers for Shields. They didn't make the playoffs last year. Who knows if they'll make the playoffs this year, given that KC's recent track record, it seems a little dubious. And, then they will have given up as you said, who knows what Myers is going to become. But for 2 years of Shields, they might have given up a guy that turns into one of the 5 or 6 best hitters in baseball.
I don't think Jay Bruce is one of the 5 or 6 best hitters in baseball. So I don't think that Will Myers is going to be quite that good. I think he strikes out far too much to be considered one of the 5 or 6 best. But I mean, we'll see. From a rotisserie or a score sheet standpoint, though, I think we've all made those go for it trades. They don't always work out, but sometimes you don't win unless you try it. And I don't blame them for trying it, and I'm not so sure it's only one more year of Shields either. They may re-sign him, for more. And who knows? We saw what Boston did this year. Who's to say that in the second year, Kansas City doesn't pull a Pittsburgh and make the playoffs?
Well, you certainly can't fault KC for trying to make the playoffs. When you haven't made the playoffs in a couple decades, you want to do something. And at least they didn't do what the Angels did, which is spend umpteen gazillion dollars and then not make the playoffs 2 years in a row.
Well, that trade would look a lot better too if Wade Davis didn't stink out the joint for Kansas City. He was supposed to be a fifth starter for them, back end starter, swingman, and he just had a terrible year. If he did anything like he was doing in Tampa, that trade would look a little bit better, or have a better chance of being accepted as being a decent trade anyway.
Speaking of the Angels and guys that are a little farther down the list nowadays, what do you think about Pujols? I mean, he went from the overall #1 pick for years in every league to at that Arizona conference you and I were at together just a week or two ago. His name hardly came up at all, and certainly not in the first couple rounds of the mock draft we did.
Yeah, he's a classic wait and see. I mean, we're already drafting now, the drafts that actually count. So right now, he's just far too risky to take, at that position, first base, where you can still get some quality players, in the first 5 or 6 rounds. It's not worth the risk of investing a pick that early on Albert Pujols. The surgery took, and he shows healthy in the spring. There will be an injury discount. You may be able to get him in the 3rd or 4th round if he shows healthy. So right now he's off my radar. Well, he's on my radar, but he's off my rankings. If he shows healthy, if he plays, I don't care how he hits. I just want to see him on the field and running and moving around, fluidly. Once we see that, the hitting will come.
It's always kind of a question, the way to win a league is to get some guys that end up, of course, outperforming expectations, but it's kind of hard to spend a first, second, or third round pick on a guy that is really risky, because you can certainly lose a league by drafting a couple guys high that end up doing nothing. That was a nice thing about him. You could pretty much, for a good, 6-8 years there, just kind of count on him having really top-notch stats. What do you think? I took Ryan Braun, that experts league we did. It was a 15-team BL. You were in it, and me, and obviously 13 other guys, and I ended up picking at the end of the first round. I took a chance and took Ryan Braun, which kind of goes against my theory of not taking risk in the first round, but I had the 14th pick, and it seems like there's a pretty good chance he can outperform the 14th pick.
I just finished my first run projection. I knocked Braun down for not playing. I knocked him down as if he didn't age. Gave him as much negative as I could without, having my computer get all sorts of mad at me. And he came out about 12th overall. We just have no idea. Is he going to be accepted into the clubhouse? How much of his performance has or has not been tainted over the years? Is he even going to be a Milwaukee Brewer? It's real easy to sit up on that stage the day that we were on and make him the 15th pick. It's a lot harder to do that if, we're all putting in some money or jelly beans or whatever the case may be, and the winner gets to keep most of them at the end. A little bit maybe harder to make that. There's so many guys like that. Pujols, Braun, and Kemp. It's just there's so many former top 5 picks that are going to influence so many drafts and auctions. It's going to be a really weird year.
There's a risk of a player not performing well, and there's a risk of a player getting hurt.
Yeah, and then you got Matt Kemp who's both. But the upside is just so great.
If I'm drafting a risky player, though, at least if you draft a guy, like the guy I took in the second round was Tulowitzki, and with him, it seems like the risk is almost entirely injury. When he plays, he's almost always really good. And the one benefit of a guy like that is if he goes on the DL, at least you get the stats from the guy you plug in for him. You're not going to just have nobody. You're going to have somebody playing shortstop. Whereas, if it's like a B.J. Upton was last year, where you stick with him like I and millions of other people did for a first couple months, you're actually playing him every day. So instead of getting no stats and getting to play a sub, what you're getting is 2 months worth of horrible stats.
Yeah, well, that's the key. The roster construct is maybe you take a middle infielder who qualifies at shortstop a little bit earlier than you would, so you can backfill Tulowitzki, and then maybe, maybe you take a utility guy or a guy on your bench that plays second base or shortstop. You have guys around. You're able to backfill, as strong as possible, and then open up your utility for an outfield or something like that. But that, if you do a Tulowitzki or Longoria, it doesn't stop there. You have to construct your team knowing the risk.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, let's see. We've talked about hitters. How about if we spend a couple minutes talking about pitching? I guess one thing I like to ask folks like yourself is, obviously, what we care about in score sheet the most for pitchers, certainly for starting pitchers, is what ERA they're going to have in 2014. So I think it's pretty well understood that just going by their ERA in 2013 is not the greatest predicting tool. Do you have a favorite one you use, FIP or expected ERA or strikeouts per inning or whatever it is?
Yeah, I got this dartboard that I bought that I have different ERAs that go around the circle, and I just throw the dart, and where it lands, that's the ERA. Well, it's a little bit more specific than that. No, I agree. I use the advanced metrics as well. You can go to a site like Fangraphs now who's got all of them on there. They got your FIP, they got your XFIP, they got Sierra, they got TRA. They have them all, and I don't worry. I don't fight over which one's better, which is more accurate. Should I regress the home run rate? Should I include the ground ball rate? I just look to see which way it teeters. As an aggregate, the expected ERAs are all below, the real ERA. I'm going to expect some improvement. I don't know where it's going to land. Jose Fernandez, his expected ERAs were all in the threes. 3.1, 2.8, 3.2, and as we know, he spun a 2.2. With even less than that in the second half. So I've seen him drafted anywhere from the second pitcher off the board, 6'5", top 6 or 7. But to me, not even a top 10 pitcher. Expected ERA is going to be, to me, is around 3. And I think that he's going a little early. Take a look at the expected ERAs. Don't get fooled by his second half scant 68 innings. And he's not the second best pitcher in Major League Baseball.
Do you look at first half, second half splits very, very much, or do you tend to look at the entire season more?
You never say never. Especially with a rookie, it's nice to know that maybe some adjustments were made. But in general, it's one way of parsing the data. There probably are some players that are better in the first and or second half for real reasons, but it's not predictive. I'm not going to up this guy with better stats because he had a great second half, but not do it with this other guy. That, to me, there's some subjective bias there. Unless I really feel there's a reason for it. Was he injured? I mean, it's a data point, but it's not factored in. It's more subjective, and I try to minimize the subjectivity. To me, it's not a leading indicator anyway.
Yeah. I mean, there's an incredible amount of data these days that folks can look at. I mean, it's not like it was 20 years ago where you just kind of did that Marcel projections where you took maybe their ERA for the last 3 years, put in a little age factor and pop something out. Now a person could spend forever. However, if you want to save some time, you can do things like go to mastersball.com and read Todd's cheat sheets or comments, and then you don't have to do all that work yourself. You can let Todd do it, which works pretty well for me.
Well, yeah, that's what I'm doing. I've got my hitters done. I'm going to have my pitchers done, and there's a lot of Marcel. The monkey helps me a lot. But as you said, with all these stats out there now, line drive rates and ground ball rates and hard hit data, there's some of the stats, home run rates, that involve, we hate to use the word, it sounds cliche, but it's true, there's some luck involved. If you can flesh the luck out of the equation, it becomes more than a weighted average. It's the weighted average less the luck. So that's what I'm in the process of doing. My spreadsheet's helping me out there. And then on December 1st, we'll have the regular launch, and for the first time this year, I'm going to provide an NFBC primer, a high-stakes league primer, where I'm getting contributions from league champions to write essays on different strategy points. So that's going to be a sort of standalone offering for Masters Ball. If you're high-stakes or thinking about dabbling, it's going to be a low-priced option to, help you understand a little bit more about the league, some of the strategy by the winners, by the guys who have won.
That all sounds pretty dang interesting. Well, hey, Todd, it's been great talking to you as always, and I'm sure we will do this again in another few weeks.
I'm here. This is now my life. This is now my job, so you know where to find me.
Yeah, I do. That's nice singing. You're always available for fantasy talk, that's for sure. Well, thanks for coming on.
My pleasure, Jeff.